James Brown. And James Brown, he was known as a great R&B musician. Of course, maybe even better known for his innovations in both soul music and even more so for funk. One of the creators and original funk musicians. And of course, he had a very legendary stage presence as well. So, as far as his childhood and early influences, his dad was said to sing blues songs in the evenings when he got home from work. So that would have been probably his earliest influence. But the interesting part about that is he actually only lived with his parents until he was 4. So, that's a very brief period of time that he would have been around his parents in that capacity. And at that point, when he was 4 years old, his mom had left the family, and he was sent to Georgia to live with his aunt. And one of the, I think, more well-documented things about James Brown's early life was his aunt ran a brothel. A lot of people talk about, James Brown being raised in a brothel. So that's where that comes from. And in those days, he showed in his early age kind of that entrepreneurial drive, which you can see throughout his career. And he would work in the fields, and he would also wash cars, and he would shine shoes, and he would perform on the streets for money. He also performed for specifically for like soldiers coming back from World War II. And so he just was really hustling in the early days. He named an early influence as Louis Jordan. Once again, Louis Jordan, huge figure for those early R&B artists. And James Brown also was largely self-taught. His first instrument was actually the harmonica, which was given to him by his father. And at 8, he learned to play the organ, and he played a little bit on the bass, guitar, saxophone, and trumpet. And he didn't necessarily master all of these instruments, but he got to a pretty competent point with all these different instruments. I think that probably was helpful for the type of direction he was trying to go with his music, as far as really innovation and shaping new sounds. And when he was 12, he formed the Cremona Trio. So that was his first, formal band experience. But with James Brown's sort of unsteady upbringing, economic troubles, not the best. We talked about, him going to live with his aunt when he was 4. So he was, just making money any way he could. And one of the ways he did that was stealing car batteries, hubcaps, and he would sell those for, basically basic needs and clothes. And then when he was 15, he got his second offense for stealing cars, and he was sentenced to 8 to 16 years in a juvenile prison. And while he was there, he formed a quartet, similarly to Chuck Berry. And so that was, in the same way, that was the way he was able to continue to work on his music. And he ended up serving about 3 years as well. And he was released on parole in 1952. And at that point, he joined the Avons, and the Avons later became the Famous Flames, which is, one of his became his backing band that he continued to perform with. And so as this group became more successful, Little Richard's manager, Clint Bradley, and he discovered them, and he signed them, and they joined the federal label of King's Records. James Brown had already kind of developed this unique sound, um, and he was kind of slowly transforming R&B into this funk sound that would emerge down the road. And because he was making these major changes, funk is definitely very different music. The sound that he was creating, a lot of people at the record and managers were pretty skeptical about that this was going to work out, and they definitely disagreed and pushed back against some of the songs that he was trying to make and perform. But the success of the songs and his persistence was really the difference. And once he got his first hit was "Please, Please, Please" in 1956. At that point, everyone kind of saw and kind of got on board a little bit as far as seeing where he was going. And then his first actual major hit was "Try Me" in 1958, which is the first song he has on our timeline. One of the things about James Brown is he's really well known for his work ethic, his tireless concert performances. He would, get to the point where he was nearly collapsing on stage. If you ever seen a James Brown concert, definitely, find one. If you haven't seen one already, but you can just see, through the concert, he's just constantly working, constantly moving, and towards the end, you can definitely see that he leaves it all on the stage, and is a very extravagant, very good showman. And in 1963, he was trying to do a live album, and he's trying to get financing for it, and he was unable to get the financing, so he had decided to finance it himself, and so he recorded Live at the Apollo, which was one of the biggest live albums of the time. It was very successful, and in this case it was a crossover hit, and it became big in the mainstream market. And so that really opened things up, and he was able to perform for the increasing integrated performances, which was an expanding market and really gave black artists to a much larger audience. So James Brown, he up until this point, he had largely remained politically neutral, being a black pop icon, and considering the times, a lot of people wanted to see him, take a stance and support certain issues. Um, but it wasn't until 1966 where he switched from that neutral stance and really started to support a lot of the civil rights and social movements that were going on at the time. And he got involved with a number of the activists, and and you can really see his music also over time shift and become more focused and more clearly in support of the black community and some of the issues that were going on at the time. And it really fits very nicely with the funk music that he was developing, because funk really becomes symbolic of black culture, in the 1970s and early 1980s. And so, once he releases the Out of Sight album, you can clearly see the polyrhythm and the staccato horns, the dynamic bass, and it was very evident where his music was going. It was very, a pretty getting to a pretty developed, funk sound, which you can clearly hear in that album. And then in 1967, when he releases Cold Sweat, that's really the iconic um, funk funk song. Maybe considered the first funk song, one of the first funk songs. But it's interesting that it is one of the first funk songs because it's very well developed. It's similar to when we talked about with T-Bone Walker and Stormy Monday. When you listen to Stormy Monday, it's when you consider the time that it came out, it really is timeless as far as the as far as slow blues goes. Really holds up well today, and very similar to Cold Sweat. When you listen to Cold Sweat, it sounds like funk from the soon to come funk era, and even funk of today. Um, and one of the things about that song or early funk is a lot of people focus on the drums, the drum beat, but really more importantly um, was the open-ended rhythms of funk and the emergence of the bass guitar, and the bass guitar really kind of becoming a key figure in the music.